Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever said something in the heat of the moment and regretted it the second it left your mouth? Have you ever let your emotions, your impulses, or even someone else's words take control of you? The truth is, we've all been there. But here's the good news: control is not something you're born with, it's something you can build. And today, I'm going to share with you 3 instant steps you can use, not tomorrow, not next week, but the very moment you need them to control yourself, stay calm, and come out stronger in any situation. Control is the difference between reacting in anger and responding with power. When we hear the word control, most people immediately think about controlling the world around them, controlling circumstances, controlling other people, controlling the outcomes of situations. But that's not real control. Real control is inward. It is not about what's happening around you, but about what's happening inside of you. The world will always test you. People will say things that offend you. Life will throw curveballs at you. Unexpected situations will shake you, but your response to all of it, that is where your true power lies. Think about it. How many times have you reacted instantly in anger, frustration, or fear, only to regret it moments later? That angry text you sent, that harsh word you spoke in the middle of a heated argument, that decision you made out of panic. In the moment, it felt justified. It felt necessary. You told yourself, I had no choice but to react. But later, when your emotions cooled, you realized it wasn't your best self that showed up. It was your most unguarded self. And that's the difference between a reaction and a response. A reaction is automatic. It's raw, unfiltered, and often destructive. It's your emotions driving the car with no brakes. When you react in anger, it may feel powerful for a split second, but it usually leaves behind damage to your relationships, damage to your reputation, and sometimes even damage to yourself. A response, on the other hand, is deliberate. It's thoughtful. It's intentional. A response isn't about suppressing your emotions. It's about directing them. A response doesn't come from weakness. It comes from strength. Imagine 2 leaders facing the same crisis. The first reacts in anger, shouting orders, blaming people, throwing around frustration. The second pauses, breathes, assesses, and then responds with clarity and calm. Which leader do you respect? Which leader do you trust? Which leader do you want to follow? It's always the one who responds with power, not the one who reacts in anger. Because people can feel the difference. Reaction is heat, response is light. One burns, the other guides. This same principle applies not only in leadership but in everyday life. Think about a parent dealing with a child who pushes their buttons. The parent who reacts in anger yells, punishes, and escalates. The child may comply out of fear, but trust and connection erode. The parent who responds with power doesn't ignore the problem, but they also don't let anger control them. They hold firm, they speak calmly but with authority, and in that moment, the child not only learns about discipline, but also about strength, patience, and respect. Now take it into the workplace. You're in a meeting, and a colleague challenges you, maybe even embarrasses you in front of others. A reaction in anger would be snapping back, cutting them off, proving them wrong in a sharp tone. It might feel like a win in that instant, but it creates an enemy, not an ally. A response with power, however, could look like acknowledging their point, holding your composure, and then presenting your perspective with confidence. Suddenly, instead of looking defensive, you look strong. Instead of looking like you lost control, you look like you're in full command. That's the power of choosing response over reaction. Control isn't about never feeling anger. It's about not letting anger be the driver. Control isn't about suppressing emotions. It's about channeling them. When you feel yourself getting triggered, control is the pause you give yourself before you speak. Control is that one deep breath before you hit send on that email. Control is recognizing, I don't have to play this game the way they want me to. I can play it my way. This is why control is so powerful, because when you can't control yourself, you give control to others. If someone can trigger your anger with a single word, who's really in charge? Not you. They are. They have the strings and you're the puppet. But when you maintain control, the opposite happens. You flip the dynamic. Now you're the one holding the strings. You're the one setting the tone. You're the one with the real power. Let's make this practical. Think about the last time you were in traffic and someone cut you off. If you reacted in anger, maybe you honked, yelled, even sped up just to prove a point. Did it change anything? No. The other driver didn't learn a lesson. The traffic didn't disappear. The only thing that changed was your blood pressure and your mood for the rest of the day. Now imagine if, instead of reacting, you responded with control. You took a breath, let them go, and reminded yourself, their behavior doesn't get to ruin my peace. That small act of control gave you more energy, more focus, more peace of mind to use for something that actually matters. And that's the key. Control saves energy. Reaction wastes it. When you're constantly reacting, you're constantly draining yourself, your focus, your time, your patience. But when you choose to respond, you conserve that energy and redirect it toward progress, growth, and solutions. Even in personal relationships, this principle is life-changing. Arguments don't escalate because one person gets angry. They escalate because both people react. But when one person decides to stay calm, to not match the anger, but instead respond with clarity, the fire loses fuel. The fight fizzles out and respect remains intact. Control, in that moment, becomes the strongest form of influence. Some people confuse reaction with strength. They think yelling louder makes them powerful. They think hitting back harder makes them strong. But strength is not in the volume of your voice. Strength is in the depth of your control. True power is the ability to stay calm in chaos, to stay grounded in storms, to hold your ground when the world is trying to push you off balance. It doesn't mean you don't act. It doesn't mean you don't stand up for yourself. It means you choose how to act. You choose the timing, the words, the tone. And that choice is what separates the powerful from the powerless. Reaction is driven by emotion. Response is guided by wisdom. Reaction is short-term. Response is long-term. Reaction may feel satisfying in the moment, but response builds respect that lasts. And here's the truth. Control is a skill. It's not something you're born with. It's something you practice. The more you choose to pause instead of react, the stronger your control becomes. The more you practice holding your peace in small moments, the more prepared you'll be in big moments. The moment you control yourself, you control the situation. Life has a way of throwing us into circumstances that feel completely out of our hands. Someone disrespects us, the meeting doesn't go our way, traffic is backed up for miles, or a loved one says something that cuts deep. And the natural instinct is to believe the situation has control over us, that we are powerless because the external world is pressing against us. But the truth is this: the moment you take control of yourself, the moment you decide your emotions, your words, your energy will not be dictated by what's happening around you. Suddenly, you're the one in charge of the entire situation. Think about the last time you saw someone lose their temper in public. Maybe it was a manager yelling at an employee in front of everyone. Maybe it was a parent snapping at a child in the middle of a store. Maybe it was a driver screaming at someone in traffic. In each of those moments, did that person look powerful? No, they looked powerless because they were not in control of themselves. Their emotions were in control, their impulses were in control, and the situation owned them. But picture the opposite. Someone who stays calm, who speaks firmly but without losing composure, who holds steady when everyone else is unraveling. That person doesn't just control themselves, they control the entire room. When you can manage your own state, you change the energy of the environment you're in. The person who shouts may get attention, but the person who stays calm gets respect. The one who reacts may escalate the problem, but the one who responds with clarity and confidence directs the outcome. And that is why self-control is not just personal strength, it's situational power. Take conflict, for example. Two people are arguing, voices rising, tempers flaring. If both lose control, the fight spins out and no one wins. But if one person decides, I will not let this situation dictate me, and keeps their voice calm, their words measured, and their body language steady, something changes. The fire loses oxygen. The argument doesn't have the same fuel. And without saying it directly, that person now leads the situation because they are the only one not being controlled by it. The same principle applies in leadership. A leader who panics in crisis spreads panic. A leader who blames in difficulty spreads fear. But a leader who keeps their composure, who speaks with steady authority even in the storm, gives everyone else a sense of confidence. People follow not the loudest voice, but the most controlled presence. That's how you can control a situation, by first controlling yourself. This even applies in small everyday moments. Imagine being in traffic and someone cuts you off aggressively. If you lose control, honk, yell, chase them down, what happens? The situation controls you. Your peace is gone, your focus is broken, and now your whole day is shaped by a stranger's decision. But if you control yourself, if you breathe, if you let it go, you've just taken back ownership of the moment. That driver doesn't get to write the story of your day. You do. Control doesn't mean you don't feel emotion. It doesn't mean you don't get angry, frustrated, or hurt. It means you don't hand those emotions the steering wheel. It means you decide how to use them. When you are in charge of yourself, you are no longer playing defense against the world. You are on offense. You set the tone, you set the pace, you set the direction. And the situation, no matter how chaotic, starts bending toward your composure instead of the other way around. Because the truth is, most situations are not controlled by circumstances, they're controlled by people. And people are controlled by their emotions. If you can master yours, you automatically gain an edge. The one who doesn't flinch when provoked, the one who doesn't crack when pressured, the one who doesn't break when tested. That person always ends up with the upper hand. And so when everything feels out of control, remind yourself the real power is not in the situation, it's in your response to it. The instant you control yourself, you are no longer being controlled, you are leading, you are directing, and you are influencing the outcome without ever forcing it. That is why control is not just self-mastery, it is situational mastery.